So we know that when you are going without sleep for elongated periods of time, your brain does not get to do its own proper detox. Our brain only does its cleansing routine at night during sleep. And when it doesn't get to do that, it can't function the same.
Welcome to the Core Happiness Podcast. I'm your host, Casey Banks, a mindset and positive psychology coach. On this podcast, we discuss all things related to creating happiness from within. So let's do it. Welcome to the show. Today, we are joined by Karese Laguerre, a registered dental hygienist and myofunctional therapist. Karese is the founder of MyoSpot, where she helps clients overcome issues like sleep apnea, TMJ disorders, and anxiety through myofunctional therapy. She is also the author of Accomplished: How to Sleep Better, Eliminate Burnout, and Execute Goals. In this episode, we'll explore how breathing and oral posture can help impact overall health. We'll also explore how small changes in breathing and oral posture can lead to significant improvements in health and overall well-being. So, if you're struggling with sleep, struggling with focus, or just looking to enhance your overall health, this conversation is for you. Enjoy. Karese, welcome. I am so excited to have you here. Thank you so much for joining the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
I want to start off first before going into your background, because I know a lot of your journey is in myofunctional therapy. But can you tell us, for the people who may not be familiar with that term, what that is?
So myofunctional therapy is kind of like having a personal trainer of sorts, but only for the muscles below the eyes and above the shoulders. So in this wonderful area that no one ever thinks about working out, there's over 100 different muscles, and I really help to strengthen and coordinate them. That way we can get proper function, because a lot of important material is in this area. Specifically, how we breathe and how we eat, how we speak, how we, do a lot of fun tasks that keep us going day to day.
And I know that your journey into myofunctional therapy was a personal one. So can you share a little bit about how you first discovered this world and what got you into it?
So it was my children. I'm a mom of 4. And as a mother of 4, I believe that most other parents, and I never like to speak for everybody, but I think this is pretty much across the board. Most parents, when somebody asks you, how's everything? We give the highlight reel. Like, we're always talking about all the good stuff. This one's got a dance recital. That one just won a soccer tournament. Like, we got all the good stuff ready to go. But there's a lot of things that we don't talk about under the surface. And my original licensure is as a registered dental hygienist, and I was working for a pediatric dentist, and I told her about some of the stuff that was going on kind of underneath the surface, like the things I would never talk to anybody else about. So out of my 4 kids, I have 1 boy. He's the oldest. He's been disappointed every time I've gotten pregnant since. He had a lot of issues with emotional and just being able to regulate his behavior. So a lot of sensory issues. And so he was very, very difficult. I remember the teachers from kindergarten telling me that he had a hard time focusing and staying on task. And I was like, oh, but he's 5. And then we played that game. Oh, but he's 6. Oh, but he's 7. What 7-year-old wants to pay attention in class? We played that game for a bit too long. And around the age of 8 or 9, where it was looking like he probably wasn't going to make it through 5th grade, it was, okay, we got to actually do something about this. And we took him to a pediatric neurologist, and boom, diagnosed ADHD. We'll come back to his story in just a little bit. My oldest daughter had every sleep issue under the sun. You name it, she experienced it. So whether it was night terrors, sleepwalking, tossing and turning, falling out of the bed in the middle of the night, blood-curdling scream from those night terrors, the snoring, the grinding. She bedwet too, every single night for 10 years. It didn't matter what we did. If it was okay, no liquids 4 hours before bed, or you have to go to the bathroom before bed, or we'll make you go twice before bed. Bedwetting was guaranteed every single night for 10 years straight. And my youngest 2 daughters had a lot of upper respiratory issues. So I don't know if anybody else can relate, but I had those 2 kids that were constant nose congested, ear infection, throat infection. It felt like every time I could probably predict it. Like, we're going to the doctor and it's either an ear infection or their throat is infected, like one of the two, because that's what it always was. So we were on this constant cycle of antibiotics with those two. And it was in talking to that pediatric dentist that I learned that all of that, though it sounds very, very different, and these children are very biologically similar, it's all connected. And it was all connected to how they were utilizing these muscles in my wonderful area of expertise and how they were breathing. And that all of that really, really affected the emotional, the regulatory control issues my son had, the sleep issues my daughter had, the respiratory and infection issues that my young two had. And it was just absolutely mind-blowing, game-changing. So I always talk about my son for this part, so let's go back to him for just a second. If we go back to his story, we spent 1.5 years after he was diagnosed with ADHD, and I'm telling you, we waited to see the best pediatric neurologist at that time. We were living in New Jersey, and she spent maybe no more than 15 minutes with us, asked us some questions off a little questionnaire. Boom, that was his diagnosis. 1.5 years. We went through 3 different types of medication. Every 6 months we saw her, and it was like we get a new script because none of it's working. And that's really all you can do with ADHD, right? Is just medication. But I had discovered and had that conversation with the pediatric dentist as we were coming up to our next visit. And so I started to tell the pediatric neurologist when we went back, I think I want to go a different route. I don't want a 4th medication. I want to go a different route. I want to look into his sleep, and I think I'm going to have him sleep tested. And immediately she stopped me. Whoa, 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 whoa. Didn't let me finish my thought, my sentence, anything. Said, you never told me he had issues with sleep. And I said, well, you never asked. So there's that part. But I never told her there were issues with her sleep. I also didn't know there were issues with her sleep because I was never asked these questions. And so she began to tell me what I had already known from the pediatric dentist. This pediatric neurologist is now beginning to tell me that there's a 70% overlap between the symptoms in children who have sleep deprivation, so they're not getting good enough quality of sleep or long enough duration of sleep, or they have some sort of disorder that is disrupting their sleep. 70% overlap in the symptoms that present for that and the symptoms that present for ADHD. So there was a very real possibility the entire time we've been medicating him that there was something else. And we never once talked about it. And that set me off. It set me off as a parent, because ADHD is just one of those things. There's no blood work you can take for it. There is no MRI or CAT scan that you're going to, oh, there it is. There's that ADHD gene. It's all symptom based. And so not having that differential diagnosis made a big, big difference. And once I started doing the work with him, I dove into myofunctional therapy very selfishly to help address my own children. But once I started to see the changes and I really saw them, and I like to say I met them for the first time on the other side of all of this stuff, where they could really flourish uninhibited by all of these things that were really, I don't know, I want to say like preventing them from being their full selves. So not to say that maybe they weren't their full selves, but there was so much more under there. Mm-hmm. And so once I saw that, I was like, everybody needs this. Everybody needs this. So many more parents where none of us are talking about it. We're all keeping it kind of surface level when somebody says, how are you? So
yeah, because it's almost like missing one question just kind of leads you down a whole different avenue that you never would have known. And most parents don't know that. So if a doctor's not asking or inquiring, then it's like, how do you know what to bring up or what would affect the diagnosis or not, or create something else? Like, so that is so fascinating. And it's always interesting to me too, how a personal struggle or personal experience can often be the driver for our purpose, and just kind of that push down, whether you do a deep dive or whether you are looking into something, whether you make it your career. I always find that that's very interesting how that happens. How did this realization happen, like in terms of affecting your mindset shift of how you approach health, both personally and professionally?
Oh, I love that. how did it shift how I approach health? I really changed 150%. I felt like as soon as I discovered there was something wrong with the breathing, I knew that there had to be other things that were wrong. And so I wanted to get to the root of everything. And so we started taking things out of the diet. We started changing over a lot of things. That way we were more on a natural trajectory of health as opposed to what we were doing, which was all traditional medicine, which to that point I felt had not worked for me. At that point, they had kind of left me without many answers or without any resolve. The children just kind of carried on in the same pattern for a while. So it just shifted the way that I thought. I wanted to go a bit more natural, holistic. Let's look at all the alternatives. If nobody's talking to me about sleep, there are other things they're not talking to me about too. So let's start taking things out. Let's remove the dairy. Let's remove the gluten. And then we started removing a lot of other things from the diet too, taking down some of the processed things, reducing the sugar. Like, we just changed over lifestyle. Let's start moving more as a family. It was a big shift.
Yeah. And you mentioned in your work that poor oral posture can impact essentially your whole body.
Yeah.
Can you walk us through just like some symptoms that you found surprising that people might not realize that are connected to the way that they breathe or the way that they hold their mouth?
Yeah. So let's just start off with what is proper oral posture, because a lot of people are just unaware as to what that is. And so I have a 1-minute breath test that we can kind of do together, and I'll talk about what proper posture is once everybody kind of determines what theirs is. So if you're sitting and you're able to, and you're not listening to this while driving, if you're driving, pay attention to the road, but think about this later on. If you're sitting and you're able to, plant both feet on the ground. I want you to sit up as nice and tall as you can. Be mindful of your posture. And I want you to, with closed lips, take a deep inhale through your nose, and then you're going to exhale through the nose. And I want you to repeat that. And you're going to do that about 3 or 4 times. Now, as you're doing that, I'm going to keep talking. Just keep breathing. Inhale, exhale through the nose. I want you to just be really internally reflective. I want you to think about where your tongue is in your mouth, how your teeth are resting. Are your teeth together? Is your tongue high? Is it in the middle of your mouth? Is it down low? Is it half up, half down? Just process it and think about it. And as you're coming out of what's possibly that 4th inhale and exhale from the nose, and you're more aware of where things are, let me tell you that proper rest posture involves, yes, predominant nasal breathing. So if you were very uncomfortable or unable to do that because 3 or 4 breaths through your nose was challenging or difficult, you're already in an improper posture. But predominant nasal breathing with lips closed, teeth slightly apart. You don't want your teeth together. Your teeth are going to be bracing, and that's most likely a lot of jaw problems that you might have. But teeth slightly apart and the tongue suctioned lightly against the whole palate. So from the front, just behind the teeth, from the front all the way to the back, like where your uvula is. And for those who are unfamiliar with that term, your uvula is that dangly ball in the middle of your throat. When you open your mouth, you should see it. If you don't see it, that's another red flag we'll talk about later, I'm sure. But your tongue should be taking up all of the space in the roof of your mouth. That's proper rest posture. A lot of great things happen when you're in proper rest posture. When you are in proper rest posture, you're able to adequately stimulate the nasal floor. We need our nose for breathing. Our bodies were designed for that. The nose is going to naturally warm and humidify the air that is entering the body. We're going to produce nitric oxide, which is going to help that oxygen bond to the red blood cells for our hemoglobins. Things can kind of go through the body and we can breathe adequately and get all that oxygen where it needs to be. We're going to be able to get our lower third of our lungs filled, so we'll be able to get more oxygen and really adequately oxygenate. The back of the tongue being connected to the soft palate and like the back portion, if everybody's unfamiliar with their soft palate, it's the back portion of the roof of your mouth. That connection is incredibly important for our vagus nerve. Our vagus nerve is one of the biggest nerves of our cranial nerves, and it powers everything. It is like the battery, I should say, of your body. That is where all your organs get their ability to function. That is how we regulate our autonomic nervous system. Everything gets thrown off if our vagus nerve is off. If you don't have good vagal tone, that is going to impact how you're able to cognitively function and go about your day. Big connections with anxiety and depression with the vagus nerve and poor vagal tone. But that tongue being able to sit against that back half of the roof of the mouth, the palate, is going to stimulate that vagus nerve. It's going to help you be more able to self-regulate that autonomic nervous system and to keep just everything else running well, because it is the powerhouse of the body. And so we want to be able to have that proper rest posture, because when we don't, you don't breathe as efficiently and you don't function as efficiently.
Does this have this? First of all, that explanation is phenomenal. That just, even for me, connected so many pieces. And I've been, as I mentioned before to you, like, been talking about breath work on this podcast for a long time. We talk about the vagus nerve, but that puts so many different pieces together for me. And I'm wondering if this is kind of a two-part question, but I'm wondering how this differs, if it does, from mewing. And then I'm also wondering if that is why mouth taping for sleep has become popular in recent years, I guess. So I'm kind of wondering if those two things are related into the work that you're talking about.
Yes, to a degree. So I would say they're pieces of the puzzle, where mewing is like, it's kind of like one-dimensional myofunctional therapy. So where it's a heavy focus on just the tongue, whereas I deal with, like I said, like 100 muscles that surround everything. Mm-hmm. So if there's other dysfunctions, mewing doesn't really address those at all. And so you might have other compensations or other things that are in disharmony when you're not addressing them.
Okay.
Mouth taping. Mouth taping is also like a piece of the puzzle. Like I said, you want to be predominantly nasal breathing. And so if you're taping your mouth, you're forcing nasal breathing, and therefore you're going to be receiving all of those benefits of nasal breathing. Nobody thinks of sleep as being so connected to breath, but it's all regulated. How you go through your sleep cycles is entirely determined by the quality of your breathing. Once you get into hypoxia, like you're not getting adequate oxygen, you no longer get those restorative functions. So why you're feeling like you're getting more restorative sleep is because you're now oxygenating better. That's where your mouth taping is coming in. And so, yes, those are all like pieces of the puzzle, but what I do really addresses like a greater area of dysfunction than just what's going on with your lips or your tongue.
Okay. And then, so for listeners who were with us and we went through that experiment together with the nasal breathing, and for those who, let's say, had their teeth together, or they realized that their tongue was resting at the bottom of their mouth, what are some first initial steps that one would take just to correct basic oral posture?
Becoming more aware of that over a longer period of time. So incorporating conscious breathing. And I think a lot of people, when they think of conscious breathing, they think of it as something like, oh, I have to sit down, I have to meditate, I have to like turn my mind off, I can't do that, or I don't have time for it, or whatever. It could be as simple as like this little task that I like to do. I call it rhythmic breathing. You might have another name for it because people in breathwork always do. But I call it rhythmic breathing. You're going to turn on a song that's somewhere between 60 to 85 beats per minute. A lot of Bruno Mars in that area. He's just a popular artist. Some Elvis in that area, some Michael Jackson in that area, just to name some popular artists. So it's not like you have to listen to boring music. You can listen to really exciting, fun music. But 60 to 85 beats per minute, no higher, no lower, because you want to keep yourself relatively regulated. What you're going to do is you're just going to listen to the song, listen to the music, and I want your breath to dance along to it. So feel free to pause breathing, to elongate your breath, to take deeper inhales, to take shorter breath, like manipulate your breathing. You'll be consciously breathing for that 3 to 4 minutes that the song might be on. During that time, be very, very aware of what's going on. So this could be done in the car while you're on your way to work. If you're on a jog and you're running, you can do this at any time and really just be aware of what the posture is most commonly. Some people might find that when they're stressed, that's when they're checking and everything might be like your jaw's really tight or your posture's low. things change. That's functional breathing. It changes so that our body can adapt. But what is it most commonly? And then once you know what it is most commonly and not just what it is on like a one-off type of basis, I want you to take some of that rhythmic breathing time and try to see if you can relax your jaw so that it's not together for the 3 minutes of the song. If you can keep your tongue up for the 3 minutes of the song. If you find that you've spent a week or 2 or 4 and it's a struggle for you, you might need additional help. And at that point, then I would say you want to call in some sort of specialist, whether it's a myofunctional therapist and or anybody else.
That is so helpful. And then for parents, like I know you mentioned, this all kind of started with your children. So for a parent who is trying to support their child or even trying to figure out if there are issues with oral posture or breathing, or they're trying to evaluate oral habits or sleep or anything along that line, what would you say to a parent who's trying to begin this journey or just support their child naturally and not with medication?
Yeah. What you want to do is you want to make sure that one, bedtime is as consistent as possible. Create routines around bedtime, and you want to start getting into a little bit of nasal hygiene if you can. I know that that becomes very challenging. Not a lot of kids like these saline sprays or anything sprayed up their nose, but you got to keep it clean. And we're cleaning every other part of our child except the one that's like the most important. We could go for, days without water, weeks without food, but nobody can go but for a few minutes without air. We need to breathe. So clean out your children's nose, make that a part of your bedtime routine, and make bedtime as consistent as possible. I know it's hard. I have 4 kids. People have sports and after school activities and extracurriculars and all sorts of things, but you gotta get into some sort of set rhythm, because our circadian rhythm is just that. It goes off of these routines that we create. When we're early on in parenting, everybody's telling you, oh, you got to get the baby on a schedule, keep the baby on a schedule. Babies love schedule. Guess who else loves schedules? Well, one, adults, like, hello, we need it too. But children thrive off these schedules too. And so set a really good routine and start monitoring your child's sleep. I know, for me, once you get them either out of your bed if you were co-sleeping, or you get them just sleeping through the night, you just want to go to your bed or like do your own thing, or it's mommy time now, right? And you're not thinking about them. But really, I wish I was more aware very early on of how they were sleeping and the signs that were all there, that there was dysfunctional patterns to their sleep. Nothing scares you more than witnessing an apnea. So we talk about obstructive sleep apnea for adults a lot. You'll hear it when you're talking about older men. You might hear your dad snored, your grandfather snored, your husband might snore. Like, we talk about men a lot, but there are children who snore, and it's not cute. It's not. Snoring is the sound of air meeting resistance trying to get into your lungs. So we don't want that. But also, apneas are only officially diagnosed as an apnea, like on a sleep study, when it's stopping of breath for 10 seconds or more. When you start to witness things like that happening in your children's sleep, so you don't have to stand over them and like creepily watch them sleep, but if you put a phone there, if you put an Apple Watch or one of the Android watches, you put that on your children because they can monitor sleep, and many of those devices have been FDA approved to do home sleep testing. You put that on there, and if you notice how many times they stop breathing sometimes, I think that will ring enough bells. Because if we stood here and we just counted out 10 seconds and you just imagine your child's not breathing for that entire time, it is a long period of time. So I think it's really important that as parents, create a routine around sleep. Make sure you're doing nasal hygiene. Get them optimally engaged for sleep. I know a lot of people don't like to mouth tape children to go to sleep. You want them to be able to open their mouth if they need to, whatever. So prime their nose. Make sure their nose is ready for breathing. Then make sure that you're monitoring it and that you're seeing the quality of their sleep. And any red flags, alert a medical professional right away. don't ignore any of the signs or the symptoms. It doesn't get better on its own. It doesn't resolve on its own. You do have to actively put in some type of work.
And I'm wondering too, for the, like a parent listening, or even somebody going to this themselves, like the connection between breathing dysfunction and focal challenges, being able to focus, or maybe if they were diagnosed with ADD or ADHD, like your son, like what is something that they should know about that connection or be aware of about the connection between breathing dysfunction and focal challenges?
I think what some parents don't understand, especially with ADHD, so it happens with ADD too, but with ADHD, that age for the hyperactivity, you think, oh, my kid's not sleepy. They're bouncing off the walls. Hyperactivity happens a lot, very frequently in children that are sleep deprived, whereas sleepy adults will be more fatigued. You're anticipating your child would be fatigued. They are hyperactive because just physiologically, the body is just really wound up. It really wants to go to sleep. So it's kind of exciting itself to hopefully induce some sleep earlier. And then you see them, they knock out, they go to sleep right away. Going to sleep too fast is always a red flag. They shouldn't be so tired that they fall asleep so fast. But that hyperactivity, real red flag. That's why they can't focus. That's why they have that inability to really stay on one task. Their body is really just trying to get to the next thing so that we can go to sleep faster. So that's going to be a really difficult focal challenge. If you're finding that your child is not getting adequate sleep at night, that's 100% impacting their cognitive abilities. So we know that when you are going without sleep for elongated periods of time, your brain does not get to do its own proper detox. Your brain has its own things that it has to, we have our endocrine system, we have our lymph nodes, and those are going to help remove things that we don't want from the body. We flush things out through our kidneys and clean. We have our liver that helps to detox things too. Our brain only does its cleansing routine at night during sleep. And when it doesn't get to do that during day, it can't function the same. So if your child is unable to focus or really pay attention, there's a lot that hasn't happened at night that the brain needs to have happen so that it can work in the same way in the morning. And so sleep is incredibly important. Make sure that, you ask your child important questions too. I think I should have brought this up earlier. Like, are they dreaming? Ask them if they remember ever dreaming. Even if it's a nightmare, they say, oh, I only remember nightmares. Okay, well, at least they've entered some stage of REM, because that's really important. That's when all of the important restorative tasks happen at night, like the brain detoxing and memories imparting and so forth.
I like that you mentioned that, because I think that's an important part. I mean, all of it is important, but that's very important because I think so many of us just as adults get tired and we think, oh, it's normal that I feel tired. But are those some signs that we should look out for that could be sleep issues or even breathing issues? Are we dreaming? Are we remembering our dreams? Like, are those things that we should be monitoring for ourselves?
Yeah, you should note that you're dreaming. So it's really difficult. A lot of times you're going to forget your dreams. So you won't remember it 10 minutes after you've woken up, but you would remember, oh yeah, I did dream last night. I can't remember what about, but I did dream last night. So that's a big red flag if you're not dreaming. All the tossing and turning, that's a big sign of non-restorative sleep too. So if you go to bed and, sheets are one way and you're wrapped one way and then you wake up and everything's all over the place, like, red flag, you did not get enough sleep at all. And so make sure that you are looking out for those types of signs. Adults are going to be, yes, very fatigued. Teenagers will even be fatigued. But children, when they're tired, sometimes do not present as fatigued. They can, but they don't always. More often than not, they may present with more hyperactivity.
Yeah. And your book, Accomplished, talks about sleep and burnout. And I love how you weave breathing into that conversation. But can you explain how mouth breathing or the sleep disorders that we're talking about can sneak up on us?
Oh my gosh. Everything sneaks up on us because I don't think we're ever looking for all of the signs. I really don't think we're ever looking for the signs. It's very hard to know. You think of sleep apnea. And I think people immediately think of like very loud, obnoxious snoring. Like you think of your dads, your grandpas, your people who you've heard having this terrible sleep. But it creeps up on you in that, and it compounds as you age. So what might start as like maybe some little cute snoring, or it might start out as like, okay, they've got their mouth open at night and you don't really hear it. It might be like a little audible breathing. There's a lot of parents that describe that to me. It's not a snore, it's audible breathing. Okay, well, breathing is supposed to be inherently quiet. You shouldn't hear breath happen at all. If you're hearing breathing, that's the sound of the air trying to make its way through, and we don't want that. No obstruction to the air getting to where it needs to be in our body. And so it's going to sneak up on you because as it's compounding over time, you're not really catching the symptoms or the signs, and that will add up. So I like to compare it to kind of like and I do this in the book Accomplished too, I compare it to like a washing machine. Everybody who has a washing machine, whether it's front loading, top loading or whatever, you put the clothes in your washing machine, you let it wash, everything's wet, and it looks like a smaller volume of things. So if you have a top load, it might be more off to the side around the edges of the bin. If it's a front load, everything looks kind of smashed down. And it looks like you could just add some more clothes and just kind of start that whole thing up again. Let's just wash some more clothes with this. Sure, go ahead. You could put more in, and I'm sure that will kind of smash down, and you might be able to get in a third load. But the quality of these washes, the quality of the clothes, it's not getting any better. You're just imparting more and more and more. And that's what happens with sleep. When you're not catching the signs early on, you're just adding more and more and more problems. And it just really compounds until one day you realize, oh, I can't put anything else into this washing machine. It's full. It's done. And that's where you start to see signs and symptoms. You're hearing the kids grinding very hard, and you're wondering why their teeth are wearing down, or they might be complaining of jaw pain, or they might be complaining of neck or upper back pain or tension, or you take them to a chiropractor. There's a lot of very forward-thinking parents who are taking their children very early on to chiropractors, and they're getting pediatric adjustments, and they say, oh, well, there's some tension along one side of the neck or so forth. Like, a lot of this is really tied into how they're sleeping, how they might be manipulating themselves in order to get adequate breathing, how they have to, move or manipulate themselves in sleep, whether they're crunched up or they're expanding their body or tilting more to one side. That way they can open up their airway. So it compounds because you really don't notice the very, very subtle first signs. It's only when it becomes really loud and glaringly obvious that we start to say, oh, there's a problem here.
Yeah. And I know we've been talking a lot about sleep, but in just hearing what you said now, in terms of some of these things can seem subtle. And so I want to go back to what you said earlier about your daughter with the allergies and like the congestion and like kind of the nasal things. Like, I don't know if it's just the oral posture but how was that affected in terms of what you found out with your daughter and her allergies, or what you thought with allergies?
So when you are not breathing adequately, like if you're mouth breathing particularly, you're not getting the filtration, the air is not being humidified or warmed, and it's not really prepped for the body. So when you're not getting that filtration or the warmth, you're exposing your body to more of the things that will cause inflammation. Our tonsils wind up being like a first line responder because that's part of the lymph system. And so those tonsils will start to become inflamed and catching things and trying to be some form of a barrier. It's not the same as when you respirate through your nose. You're supposed to take in that air through your nose that's going to filter and so forth. Once you have that inflammation, your body is now going to be more reactive. So what may start out as pollen and you might not be as affected may suddenly hit you really, really hard and have what a lot of people like to call like year-round allergies, because you're more sensitive to the histamines. You're inflamed. Your body is unable to really process everything because it's just catching things all the time. You're breathing and all the air you're taking in through your mouth is needing to be filtered and processed. And now we've got histamines, and now we've got other things coming at us, whatever bacteria. And, kids, they're Kids are yucky to begin with. And so all of that sharing of germs, like all of that extra that comes with that, they have a hard time processing it. And so it increases that inflammatory process. It increases the histamine response. And so the body is more likely to be reactive when there are allergens nearby. So we find that actually a lot of times that when we switch over and we get them nasal breathing and we start including nasal hygiene, really, really important, because some nasal hygiene, particularly those salines that have xylitol in them, those sprays are going to sit there. It's going to have like a nice antimicrobial factor. It's going to help you kind of fight off that and keep down some of that sinus inflammation that would occur when, you're breathing in a lot of allergens. So we're finding that when we switch over and we establish nasal breathing and nasal hygiene, that what was allergies and was really ruining your springs, ruining your falls, is actually just improper breathing. They were just more prone to it. So not to say that it goes away fully, but you don't have those big attacks of allergies as you once had.
Very interesting. Okay. Yeah, I love this too, because I think even as adults, and I know my father was like struggling, because like all of a sudden I have these allergies, and he had these year-round allergies, and he didn't have allergies before, but his sleep had also gotten worse, and he was starting to snore and was like going through like a sleep study to kind of figure out what was going on with his snoring and stuff when he was breathing. So that's kind of interesting. And then when you talk about nasal hygiene, I know you've mentioned the saline, but would that include like neti pot and those types of things, like in terms of irrigation?
Yes, ma'am. So when you're irrigating, even with a neti pot or any other thing, you would absolutely use saline, as you never use just like regular tap water. It would always be a saline. That way you're not introducing, anything detrimental into your body. So yeah, saline, and you would be actually rinsing out. Not everybody's, a fan of that. I think it's a really great way to cleanse out, but not everybody's a fan of that. It goes up one nostril, it comes out the other. It really cleans and flushes out those nostrils really well. But you could also just use a spray and spray up there as well, and then that's going to help. Really important for the sprays, actually, because nobody ever talks about this, but you want to look at your toes when you spray your nose. So you're going to tilt your chin down. That way, when you spray, you get the right angle. Otherwise, if you're spraying while your head is straight, it's going somewhere trapped along your nostril. Like, it's not going anywhere. So you got to look at your toes when you're going to spray your nose. Very important.
And I like that it rhymed. It's easy to remember.
Exactly.
Look at your toes when you spray your nose. That's actually a good note, because I know a lot of people, when they do it, they tend to like put their head
backwards. Yeah.
Tilt back. Yeah.
Not
tilt
going
back
in the
and
right
like
spot.
hold one nostril. And okay. So that's very, very good to know. Very good to know. One of the things that I want to talk to you about was sort of the empowerment. And I say that because I think that you are a great example of a person who turns the challenges that they've experienced, whether personal or with your kids, into like this global mission. And so I'm curious to know, for someone who's listening today who feels like they're stuck or they're tired or they're overwhelmed or maybe they're struggling in some way, what piece of advice can you give that would encourage them, or something that you would leave them with?
Yeah, there's always somebody willing to listen to you. I think that's the biggest thing. So always advocate for yourself. I wish I had advocated more for my children, because during that 10 years of my daughter wetting the bed every night, of course I talked to the pediatrician about that every single time. And she's like, don't worry, she'll outgrow it. She'll outgrow it. She'll outgrow it. But like, you're missing so many things that during these vital years where she's growing, we shouldn't be ignoring these things and just waiting for her sleep to magically one day get better. So I never felt right with the answers I got. I never felt right that like, why are we on our third medication for this ADHD thing and none of them are working? Like, it just doesn't feel right. And if it doesn't feel right, it doesn't mean that, you're doing something wrong or that your kids are getting terrible treatment. It means that you just haven't found the provider yet that is willing to listen to you. And there are people, many, many people who will listen to you. So it doesn't have to be, I think I grew up with that mindset that like doctor knows best, just defer to the doctor. But you can collaborate in healthcare. You can be a part of the team and really, I don't want to overstate how you collaborate, but there will be people who will listen to you and will be willing to look down other avenues and provide you with alternative ways that you can reach the same end goal. So keep advocating for yourself. There's always somebody who will listen, and it's not you. You're not the problem.
That is so important. And I think especially for women, I think we already have a hard time with going to look after ourselves, number one, and then going to the doctors. And then whatever we usually hear back, we just take at face value. But I think it is important to advocate for yourself. So I love that. And then I just also want to bring it in full circle, because I know we talked about myofunctional therapy. And like you said, it encompasses so many different things. But can you explain how it also complements other holistic therapies? Like you mentioned chiropractic care, nutrition, psychotherapy. Like how does it complement?
Yeah. So breathing is very well attached to a lot of our ability to regulate our autonomic nervous system, as I've kind of stated a little bit. And that's really how it goes hand in hand with mental health. Really, really big factor. We all know that once you go to a psychiatrist or a psychologist and it's anything to do with anxiety, the first thing they start to show you are some breathing exercises. So we've always known that there was that connection there, but being able to adequately breathe and like really in proper posture really does help as a natural aid to other methods and other things. We never want to discount traditional medicine fully, but it can be complemented in a lot of different ways. Myofunctional therapy is really, really great for those who are struggling with a lot of GI issues. If you're breathing through your mouth and you have to eat with your mouth, digestion, first and foremost, starts in the mouth. And you can alter the pH and the content of your salivary flora by just mouth breathing, by not adequately breathing properly in proper posture. That's going to have a negative impact. As you're breathing through your mouth and you're trying to eat and take breaths, you wind up in some ways swallowing more air. It makes you more prone to inflammation and leaky gut and those types of things. And so it's very complementary of myofunctional therapy to a lot of the GI issues, and we work well with gastrointestinal doctors. Sleep physicians, for obvious reasons, we've talked a lot about sleep. It works really, really great with dentistry because we find a lot of people who are struggling. You think all you got to do is brush and floss, right? If you just brush and floss and you do what the doctor says, that everything should be fine in your mouth. Well, how you breathe and the quality of what's going on with your salivary flora, that's going to have an impact too. So when that's altered, you find yourself more prone to gum disease, inflammation, the ability to have cavities or disease and so forth in the teeth. And so we want to also make sure that we have proper posture so that we can keep our teeth and our oral health as optimal as possible. It complements a lot of things with children with growth and development, because when that tongue is up in proper posture, it's doing, yes, stimulating the nasal floor and stimulating the vagus nerve, but it's also applying a nice, light, soft, consistent pressure that helps to expand our maxilla naturally. We're seeing a lot of kids, it's almost like a rite of passage these days to get braces, and braces are not normal. Okay, that is not something you should anticipate for your child. It should be something where like, oh, is this something I'm going to need? There's something wrong here. And if there's proper tongue posture, they develop naturally, they develop normally. So it complements a lot of different things in a lot of different ways for health and just overall wellness, because as far as I'm concerned, and there are people who feel like it's one way or the other, but I think it could be both. I think health starts from the top down. And so everything here in my wonderful area is going to impact things further down too. So it works well with a lot of different things.
My mind's blown, honestly. Like just how much it can affect so many different things. I didn't even know. But what are some common myths about whether it's breathing or whether it's sleep or maybe it's just myofunctional therapy in general? But what are some common myths that you wish more people knew?
I really wish more people were aware that one, the tongue, it has its own proper posture, and that's incredibly important to address. Two, everybody thinks that snoring is normal. Snoring's not normal. It's common. Common and normal are not the same. Okay, so it might be common, and it could very well be common through your family, but that does not make it normal. It's not something that you should anticipate. Genetics only play a portion of the role. I think that's a very common misconception. Everybody assumes genetics is 100% the thing. The study of epigenetics has proven to us time and time again that it's multifactorial, it's nature and nurture. So genetics, it plays a role, but then a lot of the external factors that come on after birth and as you are being, fed and nurtured and whatever, a lot of that plays a common factor. So that's a big one too, is that it's just not all genetics. So just because you had a particular type of sleep pattern, or maybe you had ADHD or what you think was ADHD while you were growing up, that does not destine your child to it. These are things that we can veer away from with better habits, better diet, better function.
Great. And if listeners want to know more, if they want to dive deeper into healing or breathing or sleep, where should they start?
So I have a website. I think it's a great place to start if you, at any point in time, want to just talk and kind of geek out about this stuff. I do complimentary consultations, and so you can find that on my website. It's themyospot.com. I'm sure it'll be in the show notes or something, but that's a great place to start. It'll also link off to my blog. My blog is airwaymatters.blog, and there you'll find a lot of great resources, references, and information that's really going to help you guide yourself through this journey, because it's not easy. It wasn't easy for me. So I try to make it as streamlined and as easy for others. But I'm happy to talk to anybody at any time about myofunctional therapy. It's not everybody's first step. And so that's a big thing. I should have said that with some of the myths too, is a lot of people think that, my very first step is to figure out what's going on with my tongue. Not always. A lot of times there's other things that need to be into play. So.
And of course, we will link everything you mentioned, as well as your book, Accomplished, the Myospot, and all your amazing resources in the show notes, of course.
Thank you.
And lastly, I just want to know, obviously we started off talking about your family. I kind of want to end it that way too, because look, all the things that you have to worry about already with being a mom, and then you're worried about your children and sleeping through the night and then accidents, and 10 years of straight accidents, things like that. So I just want to know, how has this truly changed your life and your family's life? How would you say it's changed?
Everything, absolutely everything. My son, we started out with 5th grade and really started on our journey into the ADHD around that time, and it wasn't looking good for him. He was not doing well and excelling at school. But once we kind of made it through our journey, there was this little brilliant boy that I feel bad was so hindered for so many years, because I played that game of he's 6, he's 7, whatever. Because by the time he was 17, he graduated high school a year early, ahead of his peers. He was able to graduate early and just move forward in life. And he's just absolutely brilliant once he was able to sleep and get the rest that he needed. My daughter, with all the sleep issues, we hadn't had any bedwetting, and she's 19 now, so a solid 9 years. And hopefully she keeps going more. But it's starting to not be my problem. So
Right.
Yeah. But she's been getting really, really good sleep, which is able to allow her to really thrive during the day. So she's been able to flourish and just be more of herself and be more present. She doesn't struggle with fatigue or issues getting out of bed in the morning. And so I'm so blessed. And then my youngest two, we have not been on antibiotics in my homes. Not one antibiotic for any purpose. No ear infection, no throat infection. These things that, I was told are so common and destined to happen, stopped happening years ago. So I feel really, really blessed that we were able to come on the other side and really see them for who they are.
That's amazing. And then, is there anything that you would like to leave with our listeners, just as any last words of wisdom, insights, or anything that you want to share as a parting note?
Yeah, just get started cleaning your nose. Get started. Like, that's the biggest thing. Get started, no matter what it is, whether it's monitoring how you're breathing, watching your kids sleep, getting into some nasal hygiene. Like, get started. Don't just listen and like, oh, put a pin in it for another time. Just get started. Get started now. You won't regret it.
I love it. Karese, thank you so much. Thank you so, so much for being here today.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
I thank you for joining me today. If you enjoyed this podcast, please feel free to rate it or leave a review. If you have any thoughts or questions, I would love to hear from you. You can email podcast@corehappiness.com. For show notes and additional resources, you can visit www.corehappiness.com. As always, please remember, never let anyone diminish your light. Until next time, sending you my love.